Quando ho portato mia figlia di 7 anni in ospedale per dei lividi inspiegabili, un'infermiera mi ha condotto in una stanza separata. Il medico, con un'espressione seria, ha detto: «Devi divorziare da tuo marito immediatamente». Quando ho chiesto «Cosa intende?», il medico ha detto: «La causa dei lividi di tua figlia è…». In a quiet suburban neighborhood in Ohio, Rachel lived with her husband Mark and their 7-year-old daughter, Emma. In the living room where soft morning light streamed through the windows, Rachel sat at her laptop working on her freelance web design projects. She cherished this lifestyle that allowed her to work from home while spending precious time with her beloved family. The aroma of coffee wafted from the kitchen. She could hear Mark preparing breakfast. He worked as an English teacher at the local high school and was beloved by his students for his gentle nature. When Rachel looked up, Mark approached with a mug in hand. "Here's your coffee. Working again today." Mark's voice carried its usual warmth. Rachel accepted the cup with a smile. "Thanks. I'm almost done with the new client site design." Small footsteps echoed from upstairs. It was Emma coming down the stairs. The little girl with light brown hair tied and 2 pigtails bounded into the living room, still in her pajamas. "Good morning, Mommy, Daddy." Her voice pleasantly broke the morning stillness. Rachel hugged Emma close. "Good morning, sweetheart. Did you sleep well?" Emma nodded energetically and ran toward her father. Mark lifted his daughter high and spun her around. Emma's laughter filled the house. Watching this happy morning scene, Rachel sometimes reflected on her past. As a child, she rarely laughed like Emma did now. She had trouble making friends at school and always sat alone in a corner of the library reading books. Even during recess, she stayed in the classroom, watching other children play through the window. That sense of loneliness from back then still lingered quietly in the depths of her heart. But after meeting Mark in college, Rachel's world changed. Mark understood her introverted nature and never pushed her to be more sociable. On their first date, Mark suggested they read books together on a quiet park bench. His kindness gradually helped Rachel open up. After 10 years of marriage, Mark knew everything about Rachel's past: the lonely days at school, the sadness of having no friends, and the anxiety that still sometimes overwhelmed her. Mark always listened to Rachel's stories and never dismissed her feelings. "I'm so glad I met you," Rachel murmured one night, burying her face in Mark's chest. Mark gently stroked her hair and replied, "Me too. Meeting you was the happiest thing in my life." Emma seemed to enjoy school. Every day when she came home, she excitedly shared what had happened that day. Rachel was genuinely happy that her daughter had grown up sociable and cheerful, unlike herself. "How was school today?" Rachel asked while preparing dinner. "It was fun. We drew pictures in art class," Emma answered happily. Though lately Rachel noticed she didn't seem quite as energetic as before. Rachel felt a bit worried, but figured it might just be normal growing pains. On the weekend, the 3 of them went to a nearby park for a picnic. Emma played happily on the playground equipment, while Mark watched his daughter with a gentle smile. Rachel sat on the blanket, etching this peaceful scene into her heart. Blue sky, green grass, and her beloved family. She couldn't imagine greater happiness. About a month after the new school term began, Rachel started noticing changes in her daughter. At the breakfast table, Emma no longer talked about school as cheerfully as before. She often sat silently, tearing her toast into small pieces while keeping her eyes on her plate. "Emma, you have PE today, right?" Rachel asked in a bright voice. Emma just nodded slightly without looking up. Mark also looked up from his newspaper, watching his daughter with concern. One Monday morning, Emma barely touched her breakfast before slumping onto the living room sofa. Even though it was almost time for school, she made no move to put on her backpack. Rachel sat down beside her daughter. "Mommy, can I stay home from school today?" Emma's voice was barely audible. Rachel, surprised, placed her hand on her daughter's forehead. "Why are you feeling sick? You don't seem to have a fever." Emma shook her head. "No, I'm fine. But I don't want to go today." Rachel was puzzled. Emma had never wanted to skip school before. In fact, she loved school so much she even wanted to go on weekends. "Did something bad happen?" Rachel asked gently. Emma bit her lip, started to say something, but finally just shook her head. "It's nothing. I'll go." When she stood up, Emma's expression was darker than any 7-year-old should be. Rachel felt her heart tighten, but she couldn't force her to talk. "Maybe it's just a temporary mood swing, maybe the beginning of adolescence," she told herself. Mark also seemed tired lately. After dinner, instead of watching TV in the living room or playing with Emma as usual, he often retreated to his study. Sometimes the light stayed on until late at night. One night, Rachel gently knocked on the study door. "Mark, are you still up?" There were hurried sounds from inside, and after a moment, the door opened. Mark's face was pale with dark circles under his eyes. "Oh, sorry. Work's been piling up," Mark said with a tired smile. "Busy with the new term." Rachel peered at her husband's face with concern. "Yeah, something like that." Mark's answer was vague, and he wouldn't meet her eyes. Papers were scattered across his desk, but when Rachel tried to get closer, Mark casually blocked her with his body. "Don't overwork yourself." "It won't do any good if you ruin your health," Rachel said, and left the study. After 10 years of marriage, this was the first time Mark had acted so secretive. Was there some trouble at work? But if so, he should be able to confide in her more. A few days later in the evening, Rachel was giving Emma a bath. While rinsing the shampoo, she noticed a purple bruise on Emma's left arm. It was a small oval-shaped bruise, as if made by a thumb and index finger. "Emma, what happened here?" Rachel lifted her daughter's arm gently in surprise. Emma flinched for a moment. "Oh, this I fell at school." "You fell where?" "In the playground. We were playing tag." Emma spoke quickly. Rachel looked at the bruise again. It didn't look like a bruise from falling, but children are active. She probably bumped into a friend while playing. "I see. Be careful." "Okay, that must have hurt." Emma nodded silently. Even after the bath, Emma was quieter than usual. A week later, Rachel found another bruise on her right thigh. It was larger than the previous one, discolored blue-purple. A few days after that, there were similar bruises on her back. Rachel's anxiety grew day by day. This wasn't normal. Even for an active child, could she really get bruises this frequently? Moreover, whenever asked about the bruises, Emma would look away and give vague answers. At dinner, Rachel decided to talk to Mark about it. While Emma was doing homework in her room, she brought it up in a low voice. "Mark, I'm worried about Emma. She's been getting bruises all over her body lately." Mark put down his chopsticks. His face seemed to pale slightly. "Bruises, yes, on her arms, thighs, and back. She says she fell, but something seems off." Mark took a deep breath and answered slowly. "Kids get hurt a lot. I was always scraping my knees as a kid, but these aren't scrapes. They're bruises, and in multiple places." Mark stood up and carried his plate to the sink. With his back turned, he said, "If you're worried, take her to the hospital. It might be good to get her checked just in case." His voice lacked its usual warmth. There was an unnatural stiffness, as if he was hiding something. "Yes, I'll take her tomorrow," Rachel said, and Mark nodded without turning around. That night, Rachel couldn't sleep. Listening to Mark's breathing beside her, anxious thoughts swirled in her head. Emma's bruises, Mark's unnatural behavior, the recent family atmosphere. Everything felt like an omen of some bigger problem. The next morning, Rachel told Emma they would skip school and go to the hospital. Emma showed a complex expression, both relieved and frightened. When she told Mark at breakfast, he was at a loss for words for a moment. "I see. Should I come with you?" Mark's offer was kind, but his voice trembled. "It's okay. You have work. I'll take her." Mark opened his mouth as if to say something, but said nothing in the end. He just gently patted Emma's head and said, "It'll be okay, Emma. Go with Mommy." Rachel didn't miss the slight trembling in his hand. In the car on the way to the hospital, Emma sat small in the back seat. Every time they stopped at a traffic light, Rachel checked on her daughter through the rear-view mirror. Emma stared out the window without saying a word. When they parked at the hospital, Rachel turned around and smiled at her daughter. "It's okay, Emma. We're just going to see the doctor." Emma nodded slightly, but her eyes held an indescribable anxiety. The pediatric waiting room was cheerfully decorated with colorful wallpaper and children's picture books. However, Rachel's heart felt heavy. Emma sat beside her mother, making her small body even smaller. While other children read picture books or played with toys, Emma just stared at the floor. When the nurse called their name, they entered the examination room. A young female nurse greeted them with a gentle smile. "You must be Emma. What brings you here today?" As Rachel began explaining the situation, the nurse's expression gradually changed. "She has bruises on her body. At first it was just on her arm, but now they're on her thighs and back too." "I see. Emma, would you mind taking off your clothes so I can take a look?" The nurse's voice remained gentle, but a serious light appeared in her eyes. Emma looked up at her mother, and after seeing Rachel nod, slowly removed her top. The nurse began carefully examining Emma's body, arms, legs, and back. She meticulously recorded the location, size, and color of each bruise in the chart. "I can confirm 2 on the arms, 1 on the right thigh, and 3 on the back," the nurse murmured quietly. There was a tension in her voice as if she had discovered something significant. Rachel became anxious. "Is there a problem?" Instead of answering, the nurse said, "Please wait a moment. I'll get the doctor," and left the room. A few minutes later, a middle-aged male doctor in a white coat entered. Dr. Miller, as he introduced himself, began the examination with a calm but cautious manner. He examined Emma's body in detail, carefully checking each bruise. Occasionally, he frowned and whispered something to the nurse. "Emma, does this hurt?" the doctor asked gently while lightly touching the bruise on her arm. Emma shook her head. "It doesn't hurt anymore. Do you remember when you got it?" Emma fell silent. She looked at her mother, opened her mouth as if to say something, but finally answered quietly, "I don't know." The doctor stood up and turned to Rachel. His expression had become even more serious. "Ma'am, I need to speak with you. Could we talk in another room?" Rachel's heart began racing. "Yes, but what about Emma?" "The nurse will stay with her. Emma, Mommy, and I are going to talk for a bit. Can you wait here and maybe read a picture book?" Emma looked anxious but nodded slightly. The nurse gently placed a hand on Emma's shoulder, saying, "It's okay. Let's pick out a book together." Rachel followed the doctor down the hallway. Her feet felt heavy as if she were walking to an execution. Opening the door marked consultation room, the doctor solemnly offered her a chair once inside. The room contained only a desk and chairs with posters about children's rights on the walls. The doctor sat across from the desk, clasped his hands, and looked at Rachel with a serious expression. "Ma'am, I'll be direct. There are very concerning aspects about your daughter's bruises." Rachel held her breath. "Is it some kind of illness?" The doctor shook his head. "No, it's not an illness. The pattern of these bruises suggests they were caused by external force, not medical reasons." External force. Rachel couldn't understand what the doctor meant. The doctor paused before continuing. "I'm sorry to say this, but the location and shape of these bruises suggests they were made by adult hands. In other words, there's a very high possibility of physical abuse." Rachel couldn't believe her ears. The color drained from her face and her hands began to shake. Abuse? That can't be. Look at the bruise locations. The doctor showed the diagram in the chart. The arm bruises match grip marks. The back bruises match hitting marks. These cannot be explained as accidental injuries. Rachel's mind went blank. Who? Why? Emma was almost always at home, just going between school and home. Could it be at school? No. The teachers would notice. Ma'am, I'm sorry to ask, but how is your relationship with your husband? The doctor's question interrupted Rachel's thoughts. Mark. Mark did this to Emma. Rachel stared at the doctor in disbelief. Most domestic violence is perpetrated by spouses or adults living in the home. Your daughter's silence is also a typical response when the abuser is a family member. Rachel shook her head violently. No. Mark is a gentle husband. He truly loves Emma. He would never do such a thing. But the doctor's expression didn't change. Ma'am, this is a serious matter concerning your daughter's safety. I understand your emotional response, but the evidence is clear. I strongly recommend you divorce your husband immediately and move your daughter to a safe environment. Divorce? Rachel repeated with a trembling voice. Yes, you need to act now to protect your daughter. If necessary, we may need to contact Child Protective Services. Tears began flowing from Rachel's eyes. Mark, gentle Mark, had been hurting Emma. She couldn't believe it, didn't want to believe it. But the doctor's words were clear, and the evidence was there. Mark's recent unnatural behavior, Emma's frightened demeanor, everything seemed to point to a terrible truth. But why? How? Rachel sobbed. The doctor said sympathetically. There are various reasons: stress, alcohol, or perhaps a cycle of abuse he experienced as a child. But regardless of the reason, your daughter's safety is the priority. Rachel covered her face with both hands. She could hear the sound of the happy home they had built crumbling in an instant. Her beloved husband had actually been hurting their daughter. She couldn't accept that fact. Ma'am, please take your daughter home today, but you must act quickly. If there's no improvement by the next visit, we'll have to take legal action. Rachel stood up shakily. I understand. Thank you. Returning to the examination room, Emma looked up at her mother anxiously. Mommy, are you okay? Rachel forced a smile. I'm fine, Emma. Let's go home. Walking to the parking lot after leaving the hospital, Rachel's mind was in chaos. She would have to confront Mark when they got home. She had to find out the truth and protect her daughter. But what if Mark denied it? What if the doctor's diagnosis was wrong? Getting into the car and starting the engine, Rachel saw Emma's anxious face in the rearview mirror and steeled her resolve. With trembling hands, she took out her phone and called Mark. After 3 rings, Mark's voice came through. Rachel, how did it go at the hospital? We're coming home now. Mark, we need to talk right away. It's very important. She could hear Mark gasp on the other end. Okay, I'll be waiting. When they arrived home, Mark was waiting at the entrance. Though he should have been at school at this time, he seemed to have left work early. His face was pale with deep anxiety in his eyes. Rachel urged Emma to go to her room. Emma, go rest in your room for a bit. Mommy and Daddy need to talk. Sensing the tension between her parents, Emma silently went upstairs. After confirming her small figure had disappeared to the second floor, Rachel faced Mark. The living room air was heavy and suffocating. Rachel couldn't even sit on the sofa and stood facing Mark. Tears welled in her eyes. Mark, what did you do to Emma? Her voice trembled. A mixture of anger, sadness, and fear of betrayal tightened her chest. Mark's eyes widened in surprise. What are you talking about? I did something to Emma. Don't play dumb. Rachel raised her voice. The doctor said Emma's bruises are from adult abuse. You did it, didn't you? All color completely drained from Mark's face. He stumbled backward, pressing his back against the wall. "No, Rachel. It wasn't me. I would never hurt Emma." "Then who?" Rachel shouted. "Emma only goes to school and home. I'm home all day watching her. That only leaves you." Mark covered his face with both hands and let out a deep sigh. Then, slowly lowering his hands, he looked straight into Rachel's eyes. Those eyes held a mixture of deep anguish and determination. "Rachel, please sit down. There's something I need to tell you." Rachel sat cautiously on the sofa. Mark sat in the chair across from her, clasping his trembling hands on his knees. "Emma is being bullied at school." Mark's voice was low and heavy. Rachel gasped. "Bullied?" "Yes, by her classmates. Every day she's hit, kicked, pushed around." Mark's voice shook. 3 weeks ago, the school contacted me. A teacher found Emma crying and asked what was wrong. Rachel was confused. "Why didn't you tell me? Why did you hide it?" Mark stood up and stared out the window. His shoulders trembled slightly. "I couldn't tell you. I couldn't tell you that our daughter was being bullied." "Why?" Rachel stood up and approached Mark. "We're married, aren't we? Why would you hide something so important?" When Mark turned around, tears glistened in his eyes. "You had a hard time at school as a child. You were isolated, had no friends. I know how much you suffered." Rachel froze. Memories of the past came flooding back. Days reading alone in the corner of the library. The loneliness of staying in the classroom during recess. The isolation of having no one to talk to. "You still sometimes cry in your sleep dreaming about those days." Mark continued. "I know how much you still carry those wounds. That's why I couldn't tell you that Emma was going through something similar. But that's different." Rachel shook her head. "I'm a parent. I have a responsibility to protect my daughter. I know. But I didn't want to see you suffer again." Mark's voice became choked with sobs. "I knew you would blame yourself. I could see you would suffer, overlaying it with your own past." Rachel approached Mark with tears streaming down. "But that doesn't make it right to stay silent. Emma has been suffering all this time." Just then, a small voice came from the stairs. "Mommy, Daddy." When they turned around, Emma was standing halfway down the stairs. Her small body in pajamas was trembling. "Emma!" Rachel rushed to her daughter. "What's wrong?" Large tears spilled from Emma's eyes. "I'm sorry, Mommy." I lied. Rachel hugged Emma. "What did you lie about?" "About the bruises." "Kids at school did it," Emma confessed through tears. "But Daddy said not to tell you because you had a hard time at school before, and knowing about me would make you even sadder." Rachel looked at Mark. He had also approached the stairs. Emma continued. "Daddy called the school every day and talked to the teacher, but he said to keep it secret from Mommy. I didn't want to make you sad." Rachel's heart felt like it was being torn apart. Her husband and daughter had been keeping secrets to protect her. That kindness had nearly torn the family apart. "Emma, who's bullying you?" Rachel asked gently. "Jessica and her friends," Emma answered in a small voice. "At first they just ignored me, but it got worse and worse. They started pushing and hitting me." Mark spoke up. "I talked with the school many times, but their response was slow. They said there was no evidence that it was just kids fighting." Rachel trembled with anger, but that anger was no longer directed at Mark. Why was Emma targeted? Emma answered, "Because I was the new kid, and because Jessica's favorite boy became friends with me." Rachel's heart ached that such cruelty existed even in the world of 7-year-olds, and she realized that her own past experiences had hindered family communication. "I'm sorry," Rachel cried, hugging both Emma and Mark. "Because of me, I caused you both unnecessary worry." Mark was also crying. "No, I was wrong. Trying to protect you, I ended up hurting our family," Emma said quietly between her parents. "Let's not keep secrets anymore. Let's tell each other everything." The three of them held each other and cried for a while. The afternoon light in the living room gently embraced the hugging family. Rachel looked up and gazed at her family's faces. "What should we do now?" Mark answered. "First, we'll have a proper discussion with the school. If that doesn't work, we'll consider transferring." "But won't that be running away?" Rachel said worriedly. "It's not running away." Mark shook his head. "We're making the best choice to protect Emma." Emma said quietly, "I want to be strong like Mommy. Someone who can overcome hard things." Rachel stroked her daughter's head. "You're already strong enough. You endured alone. But from now on, you're not alone. We'll all support each other as a family." Mark said, "Tomorrow, let's all three go to school. We'll talk with the principal and homeroom teacher, and if necessary, we'll appeal to the school board." Rachel nodded. "Right. Emma's safety is the priority. If the school doesn't respond appropriately, we'll take action." That night, the three slept in the same bed. Emma slept peacefully between her parents, and Rachel and Mark held hands across their daughter. The next day, Rachel and Mark visited the school together. The meeting in the principal's office lasted 2 hours. Rachel calmly but firmly demanded proper treatment for her daughter. "I cannot stand by and watch my daughter get hurt anymore." Rachel's voice was quiet but powerful. "If the school doesn't take appropriate action, we will make other choices." The principal looked confused, but ultimately promised to investigate the bullying. However, Rachel and Mark weren't planning to wait for the school's response. That evening, they began looking into transfer procedures. A week later, Jessica and her friend's parents were called to the school. Emma's bullying had been revealed through other students' testimonies. The children involved in the bullying received severe warnings, and their parents were also given guidance from the school. But Rachel and Mark's determination didn't change. "I think changing the environment is best for Emma," Mark said. Rachel agreed. A fresh start was necessary for the whole family. 3 months later, Emma transferred to an elementary school in the neighboring district. They didn't move, but they woke up a bit earlier each morning, and Mark would drop Emma off at the new school before work. After 6 months, Emma's smile had completely returned. She made a best friend at the new school and started playing with her at the park after school. Rachel watched from a park bench as her daughter played happily, sighing with relief. "Mommy, look!" Emma proudly showed off the sandcastle she had made with her new friend. There was no shadow of fear in that smile anymore. One night, as the three of them sat around the dinner table, Emma suddenly said, "Mommy, Daddy, thank you." "For what?" Rachel asked gently. "For protecting me and for fighting together with me." Emma's eyes were serious. Mark took Emma's hand. "We're family. It's only natural." Rachel took her daughter's other hand. "We'll always be together. No matter what happens, we'll overcome it together as a family." Emma squeezed both her parents' hands back. "I won't endure things alone anymore. If something happens, I'll tell Mommy and Daddy right away." Rachel reflected on her own past, the lonely days as a child, and how they had hindered family communication. But now, that experience had become nourishment that bound the family more strongly together. Now, a year after that hospital examination, Rachel thought about how the doctor's misunderstanding had triggered the revelation of the family's secrets. It was a painful experience, but ultimately, it deepened the family's bonds. Outside the window, snow had begun to fall quietly. In the warm living room, the three sat close together. A family movie played on the TV, and Emma laughed happily between her parents.